All right, so welcome to the Future Media podcast. This is where I report on the collision of big media and big tech, normally with some AI and some real life stories thrown in to spice things up. Now, I've got a guest back who I haven't seen for a while. So Justine Roberts is joining me today. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I'm great. So for those of you who don't know, Justine is one of the founders of Mumsnet, which is an astonishing community of mums in the UK and parents, dads as well in the UK, who are now talking and meeting. How many people have you got now in the platform?
7 million. We've got 7 million monthly uniques.
And you obviously expected it to grow to 7 million when you started it. Is that what happened?
Yeah, it's been a very long journey. We're 26 years old, so it was a slow start, but all grown by word of mouth.
Amazing stuff. So congratulations on that. But what I'm fascinated by is that when we spoke, we spoke a long time ago, actually, when you were talking about doing a deal potentially for AI. You always seem to be a trailblazer for really interesting new ideas about ways to control or use tech for the betterment of your community. Now, I was inspired to ring you because I saw that you were launching a new device, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. But since we spoke, Google's done a deal to make to run Siri for Apple. So now it means that every smartphone in the world, 97% of world smartphones, will now run on Google technology, which I'm not very happy about, to be honest with you. That troubles me. And then this week, we've seen 2 court cases with Meta talking about surveilling children, a lot of it being done on mobile, all being done for profit. And here we are, feeling really uncomfortable about the impact of big tech and its products on our lives. And so you came up with a really novel idea, and that's what I want to talk about today. You came up with the idea of building your own phone, a phone that has privacy by default. And I want to know everything about that. So please tell me what you're up to.
Okay. Well, so obviously our parents, we've got 7 million parents, and they are very concerned about what addictive phones and social media apps are doing to family life. So they describe a constant battle of trying to restrict teens' use and kids' use of phones. And parents are in a real spot because it's very hard to be the only parent who says no when their entire social life is centered on these devices. So on one hand, we are campaigning very strongly in this country to get governments to act to delay social media use for kids. But in the meantime, what is sorely missing from the options for parents is a phone which allows them to be in complete control. So the first thing I'm going to say is we just definitely didn't build this. This collaborative project. We partnered with an amazing phone company called Nothing, who make incredibly cool phones, and another amazing company called Safety Mode, who did all the AI software layer and the kind of safety cutting edge controls that are embedded in this phone. The first thing to say is all the controls are embedded in the phone, so it's in the hardware, it's not the software. Makes it so much more difficult for kids to get round the controls, and it's very, very easy to set up, and it allows parents to completely control what apps are on the phone, what apps aren't on the phone, when they were on the phone, so you can control the time of it. And there's also an AI layer that looks at content within messages like WhatsApp and flags things that are potentially worrying, either bullying or bad language, nudity, inappropriate stuff. And it can start off as kind of simple brick. We recognize that phones are an incredibly useful thing. You can't travel around in our country without, your Oyster app. You need so many things, booking festivals, booking travel arrangements, library cards, everything. A smartphone is a great device. Let's not forget that. But the untrammeled access and the difficulty parents have in controlling it meant that we wanted to come up with something else. And it's actually amazing to me that big tech haven't produced this, because parents are crying out for it. And it sort of speaks to the fact that their entire model is built on engagement and attention, and they are not really wanting to allow anyone to control that. So here it is, the other phone. It's an incredibly cool phone, so don't let the thought that Mumsnet is involved think that this isn't cool. It's really cool. I've got one here, and you know, actually this is brand new, so I could unbox with you if you want.
Yeah, no, I'd love you to. I want you to send me one.
I'll send you one. Of course, we'll send you one. But it's, you know, it retails at 250 quid. It's the latest, very smart tech. Nothing to a really compelling offer for their phones generally. It's an Android phone, but it's got everything you will need. So you can't really see me do this. I've never really done a live unboxing before. You can probably tell.
There you go.
I don't know what I'm doing, but anyway, it's a lovely piece of tech here. You know, very sleek, very cool at the back.
Yeah.
And it looks like a normal smartphone, but the difference is it's utterly controllable by the parents because of the way it's built, and also the AI layer you can have on top that will notify you if your kids, you know, getting inappropriate content from anyone. It allows you to say, right, within the hours of school hours, and actually, you know, at 7 o'clock at night, this is off. It allows you to add apps as and when you think that it's the right age for them and they can cope. So basically, it puts parents back in control. And it means it takes away all those awful family battles where you're trying to persuade your poor teen who's utterly addicted, the way we all are, to our phones, to get off and do something else instead. So that's the idea.
Amazing and so smart, and I'm really glad that you've taken the initiative on that. The funny thing is, we've spoken about this before as well. We live in the future in Australia, literally, because it is already you know, evening here from where it's morning for you in the UK. But more than that, we're also usually the first with some interesting laws and regulations, and we already have an under-16s ban. And it's been really interesting how the nation responded. So I'll give you a bit of an insight. You know, initially, you know, in the months running up to it starting in December, everybody was kind of naysaying, saying it would never work, kids would find a way around it, the tech companies would find a way to talk the government out of it, the government would stuff it up, it would go really badly, children would be depressed, a whole load of people would be left lonely and bereft and, you know, struggling. And as it got closer and closer, everybody suddenly stopped talking and held their breath to see what would happen. And, you know, the sky didn't fall in, and then it happened. And then 4.5 million accounts were shut down. And, you know, a whole load of kids said they didn't see any change, and a whole load of kids did. But really, it hasn't been a disaster. And every parent has felt somewhat empowered since it's happened to say no. And when their kid's sitting on the phone to say, well, what are you doing? You're on TikTok. Well, you can't be on TikTok because the rules say you can't be on TikTok now. Yeah. And if you keep saying on TikTok, I might call someone, and then they'll stop you being on TikTok, right? Yeah. And so all of these things have happened, and we have seen a kind of step forward, right? And it's really interesting. The naysayers will jump on, and I see them all the time. They're always in my social feeds being up on me about this, saying, well, you know, my kid's not been kicked off. And I'm like, well, there's loads of kids that haven't been kicked off. That doesn't mean that loads of kids haven't, you know, and loads of kids have been kicked off. And it's a good outcome.
Yeah, look, I think the other phone is a brilliant product for a world where we don't have that ban, or even where you do and you think maybe your kid is just too good at getting around restrictions. But the key to having a ban or a delay, I like to call it a delay. Because,
yeah, they call it a delay here, actually.
Is that you change the default. For the kids are on social media because their friends are. That's where it's all happening. That's where it's at. If you can just change the tipping point, then it's much easier to say to your children, let's just delay this. You know, you're not missing out. So it doesn't have to be perfect for it to work. It just needs, parents need some help, and you can't be the only parent who bans your kids from the place where their social life is. So I think, you know, we hear all this now because we're going through a consultation now in the UK. The government's launched one to discuss this, and they're just running some pilots. And at the moment, the music I'm getting from them is, well, do something, but we think a full ban is too far. And they've been fed these lines by big tech, which are, all the kids are going to go to the dark web. Well, I have not seen any evidence of that. That misses the point as to why kids are online. They're online because their friends are online. They're not online to find, you know, deep, dark conspiracy theories in the dark web. That's not what they're doing it for. So yeah, one or two might, but one or two would anyway. So that's just a red herring. I think, you know, the other thing is, honestly, I was talking to someone in government the other day who I will remain nameless, but who literally said, well, my kids are fine. You know, I control them. And so why can't other parents? And I said to her, I will say she was just she, maybe some people have more chaotic or difficult lives or whatever. She turned to me and says, no one has a more difficult life and stressful life than me. I'm a member of this government, and, you know, and the lack of empathy for actually, just because I'm fine doesn't, you know, we know the stats about association with all kinds of anxiety, depression, you know, worst cases, eating disorder, self-harm, suicide. Now, then they'll come back and say, well, that's correlation, not causation, which sounds remarkably like the tobacco argument from 30 years ago. Yeah, tell me exactly how you prove causation. You're going to stick a load of the 12-year-olds in a room and put them on 4 hours social media a day and then have a, you know, identical twin group, which aren't. It's very hard to prove this stuff, but we know enough. And, you know, 82% of our parents support a ban on Mumsnet. 61% say their kids are addicted in one way or another to their phone. I mean, we don't need to have definitive causal proof to see what's going on. Kids are depressed, and the parents are extremely worried about their mental health. And more to the point, we have this daily battle in family life. So I very much hope we can persuade our government to act in the way that your government over in Australia has. But in the meantime, we've produced the other phone in case they don't, and for while they take their time, which gives parents the control that is so sorely lacking, and gives family life, you know, back to what it should be, which is not a daily battle.
Brilliant. I love all of that. So just before I move to the phone, because I want to know all about the phone, you know, when I hear government say things like that, and I hear it quite a lot around the traps, the truth is the government are not qualified to make a call on this at the moment, because they haven't done the research in the depth that the people that are identifying the harms have. So we've just seen a court case in America just conclude 2 days ago. You know, this is in America. This is where these companies are based. You know, if there's a place that wouldn't want to do this, it's there. Yeah, their you know, primary victim that they used for this court case was on Instagram for 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. And absolutely dreadful. They did 5 years of investigation, thousands, tens of thousands of complaints. And so it's a little bit too easy just to say, I know better because I'm in Parliament.
I know, it's insane. But I mean, I think the great thing about that case is it basically pins the addiction on the big tech companies. And we know, you know, that you've seen the emails that they knew of this. They, you know, it's proved that they knew that these things were addictive and potentially harmful for many, many years. And that's the point that we've been trying to get across. Government for a long time is focused on the content. Now, obviously, I think big tech has a responsibility to make sure that harmful content is filtered out, and they don't do that well enough. But it's the device themselves, it's the actual, you know, the way these things are set up to encourage engagement as a big business model. That's the bit that people have not really got to grips with. So irrespective of whether you see harmful content, and there's a pretty damn good chance you will, whether it's grooming or, you know, violence or pornography. But even if that didn't happen, the device, just the setup of these apps themselves, the social media apps, are designed to give you dopamine hits. They're designed to keep you on. They're designed to stop you doing other things in your life. And that with developing brains and the way the brains are, very malleable, has all kinds of effects that we're just only beginning to understand. So, there's an epidemic of ADHD on this country. That isn't a surprise when you think how these apps work. So I think that's what's so great about this is obviously it's one ruling, but it does open the floodgates for, look, they designed them knowing that they were dangerous because they put their business model first.
I know they did, because I've read the evidence bundles. So there are somewhere in the region of around 60 cases currently pending in the US. And there's over 5 million words of evidence, and I've read all of it. It took me 4 months.
Wow.
I have no doubt. No doubt. I mean, this goes all the way to the top. They're named all the way through it. All the email trails are clearly stated. Yeah. And so we're going to see case after case after case. We've had 2 decisions just this week against Meta, and one of them was also against YouTube, for creating applications that have addiction built in as a design. It's there specifically to hook the kids, and it's looking to hook the kids because if they hook the kids early, then they can keep them for a long time. And they say we never had any interest in kids. And in the court case, it was revealed, an internal document said that if we can hook a kid before they're 13, they'll be worth $270 to us. They've done the work. Okay, so I think we just have to put that to bed. So I love the idea that we might move from a smartphone to a dumber phone. That makes an awful lot of sense to me. I have an iPhone at the moment, and I am this close to dumping it for a dumb phone. And I've been looking all the way back to a Nokia, but I've also been looking at these phones. So, so the nothing phone is a really interesting concept. So yeah. It's a fork of Android, which is the Google created open source technology, but you can take your own version that doesn't do all the Google stuff, which is what these guys at Beyond have done. You've got a forked version. And what I love is that you've taken that, a clean phone that does cool stuff, but doesn't have all the addictive stuff preloaded. So it starts clean.
Yeah.
But then you've added another layer on top that gives controls to the parent to control the phone. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works? As a parent, what extra control do I get now my 14-year-old has got?
So it's device level parental control. And it allows radical whitelisting. So you can lock the phone to one site if you want. I mean, we have parents who say to us, they need to have access to the App Store because their kid's got diabetes, and there are diabetes apps that give reminders. So you could have, for instance, just that and a normal operation of a phone, and maybe, WhatsApp or whatever it is, and one messaging thing that you have contact with. And that's how you could lock it down like that. And then over time, add stuff. It requires parental approval to add contacts or downloads. You have practical safety tools embedded, like live location checks. You can call home, have SOS signals for that. Simple contact rules and timers, allowing you to set the time very easily. If you say, right, you're allowed to have 1 hour of, I don't know, this gaming app in the afternoon, it will automatically go off. It's very simple for the parent to set those controls. And I think the other thing is the AI sort of software layer on top, which actually looks as device level, looking at the content of what's going on the phone. So this thing that flags, to the parent on their phone, so-and-so's had this message, we've blocked it, you can see it and let it go through if you want, but it's, it's threatening to kill them, so we blocked it, or something. Yeah. So that as well. And there are other things we've done, like the homepage is really dull. We have not made an interesting homepage. It doesn't have any features. It's like the opposite. Instead of thinking what features gets your kids hooked, it's, how can we make this really boring and functional? You know, that's the idea. It's not really made, Ricky, with the idea that we're going to make a huge profit. It retails at around £280. It really is very mission driven. And you know, it's quite confusing, the terminology. It's the other phone that with nothing, who are these very cool producers of phones. So we wanted it to be cool and for the kids to want it, not to feel like a device that is made by your mum, you know. So,
yeah. All right, but it might be controlled by your mum.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the control. So if I'm a parent and my child's got one of these phones and my child's trying to break it or trying to get stuff or trying to go around the rules, do I control it as the parent from my phone? Do I get alerts to my phone, or do I need to go to the handset?
So you can, there are both options. So when it's set up, you can set it up on their handset, but you can subscribe to an ongoing safety layer. So you can either just buy the phone, set it up as you wish, and then you have to control it on the handset. So you have to grab the handset from the kid and say, all right, I'm going to give you more access now. Or if you subscribe to for $5.99 a month to the ongoing AI safety layer, then you can do it from your phone. So you've got options, really.
Okay.
And the other thing is, we've tested this very, very thoroughly with a bunch of teams, and to see if they can break it, to see if they can get around it and get on social media. And 100% success, including, by the way, Hugh Grant's children. He's a big worrier about phones and his kids, and we got his kids to test it, and they couldn't break through. So no one's been able to break through it, because it is, you know, it's built into the device as opposed to an app on the side.
What's been the reaction from the parents in your community?
I think, you know, people, the interesting thing is that the people are very, very supportive of the other phone and the idea and what we're trying to do. Where it's interesting where it competes, because it competes with a hand-me-down phone from the parent, which is essentially free. So, you know, most kids at the age of 9 or 10, or unfortunately even younger sometimes, are getting their parents' old phone. That's the first device they have. So to make a conscious decision to buy a new phone feels actually a bit wrong somehow, because we're all thinking, oh, we don't really want to, you know, encourage this and get a shiny new phone. So we've got to get people over that hump to say, just because it's a hand-me-down, it doesn't mean it's sort of safe. Just because it's an old phone, it doesn't mean it's safe. And I think, you know, that's all part of the messaging that we're talking to people about. So very excited. But, you know, when you're competing with something that's free, it's tricky, and we need to explain to people that actually an old iPhone or an old Android can be a time bomb.
Well, the only way you can change this is to unlearn habits.
Yes.
Okay, because the whole point of this is that it is an addiction. It is a habit, yeah, for all of us. And so we need to unlearn some things, and there's no harm in that, right? You know, sometimes it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think the debate has really ramped up. I mean, obviously, you know, you're way ahead in Australia, but the debate has really ramped up in this country, and people are actually beginning to really think I mean, they know it's a pain in family life, but actually we've just had some laws around use of screens for under 5-year-olds. The government has finally given some guidance around that. And we've been asking for that for years, because I think it's, as you're right, it's all about changing the norms. And as long as everyone else is doing it, as a parent, you kind of think, well, it can't be that bad. You know, everyone else is on the, you know, 2-year-olds are on iPads. So, so I think we're beginning to have that debate where I think the norms are going to be reset, whether or not we have a ban. And that's where the other phone comes in, because I think people are beginning to be much more conscious about the explosive nature of what they're putting in their kids' hands when they give them an iPhone at the age of 10.
I posted today an article about the court case in California, okay, and the wonderful way they'd put that case together. I instantly got a note on my email from one of the VCs that funds Meta, basically saying, Ricky, you're just trying to give the parents a get out of jail free card. I have children. My job is to parent my children. You know, if people don't want to parent their children, it's not our job to do it for them. Is that our job as well as a social network? Is it to be a parent for the parents?
You hear that a lot, don't you? But we constantly in our world legislate for things that are harmful to kids. You know, we don't let kids buy cigarettes, and some do. Some get through, but you know, generally that's the norm. We don't let kids buy alcohol. And the way we've been trying to frame it here is this is a public health crisis. You know, when you've got 92% of parents on Mumsnet concerned about the effect of social media on their kids' mental health and well-being, 92%, then you know, this is a public health crisis. We know that teen phone addiction doubles the risk of anxiety, that it triples the risk of depression, that it leads to a higher risk of suicidal behavior. No other product can you put in the hands of kids without testing it first and proving it's safe. For some reason, because presumably of how wonderfully, useful and how excited we all were when suddenly smartphones arrived, that has not applied to phones and social media for kids. And we need to rein that back in and say, no one's proved these things are safe. All the evidence, yes, it's correlation, not causation, but there's a lot of it out there suggests these things are harmful. They are a public health risk. And until the companies can prove that these things are risk-free and don't cause harm to our kids, they should be taken out at least until 16.
I think that they have a different view. I think their view is, well, it's for you to prove they're harmful because we're saying they're not. So it's who has the burden of proof. The interesting thing is that in that debate, again, I had somebody else on LinkedIn haranguing me this morning. They've all been after me today. It's been one of those days. And they were basically saying, this lady was basically saying that, there's no proof. You can't prove anything here. And I said, well, I don't need to because the incentive is financial. So this is all about advertising and ad revenue and ad yield. And so they need these kids to be on here because that's where they make tons and tons of money. I mean, Snap makes half of its money from advertising to kids under 16. It's in its own financial report, right? And so when you view it through that lens, you know the incentives are broken. But the response from this person was, Ricky, the incentives don't matter. It's down to the parents. And when I spoke to the e-safety commissioner here, she came on this podcast a few weeks ago. She just basically said, I just don't think it is on the parents. I think it's on the companies that are making the money. It's easy to say it's the parents' fault, but the parents are busy being parents. Yeah, they don't need.
So, it's regularly on Mumsnet, people describe their kids' social media use as being like having a crack addict in the house. They'll take the phone away, they'll hide it, they'll even lock it. And kids will spend hours trying to crack safes and wandering around the house at night. I think it's a misunderstanding of how addictive by design the product is to say, parents, it's up to you. This isn't about weak parenting. You can't out-parent a business model. This is, these are the brightest minds in the world have been commissioned by big tech to build the most addictive thing they possibly can. So, we should be thinking of it like that. This is like a proper class A drug. And to expect parents to be and also just it's ruining family life. It's ruining family life having that battle. Parents are trying. They're not just sitting there and say, okay, off you go, be on your phone for 15 hours a day. They're trying, but you try reasoning with a crack addict.
I think your community is incredibly strong, and the signal that you get from them is incredibly loud. Yeah, I heard a beautiful comment. Sorry, I've got an anecdote for everything today. It's just that I've been diving really deeply into this. I interviewed Kelly Stonelake recently. She's one of the Meta whistleblowers. She was a director at Meta. And she said to me, look, Ricky, at the end of the day, what you're talking about is a billionaire competing with a 12-year-old in his bedroom. Yeah, that's what you're talking about. And so you cannot expect the parent or the child to solve this problem. That's what we have rules and regulations for. Your dream world, Justine, right? we've got to solve this, right? And I think we are at the beginning of the solution. I think the snowball is rolling downhill and gaining pace. What would you like to see next? What do you think is the action that your government could take that would be meaningful for your audience, for your community?
I think we should have introduce a delay similar to the one in Australia and other countries. France and Spain are talking about this now.
57 countries now, 57.
Yeah. I think we should do that because I think it, as I say, it may not be perfect, but it changes the default. At the same time, I don't think we can let the platforms off the hook about generally thinking about products which are highly addictive, thinking about products where they routinely allow harmful content on. I think, you know, we should not just say, okay, it's a terrible product, but you know, as long as you don't access it till you're 15, that's okay. So I think we have to do both. I think we have to encourage the platforms to and show some teeth. And our regulator here has shown no teeth whatsoever, but in actually holding them to account for, you know, the fact that you have a load of groomers on there, the fact that there's untrammeled porn and, you know, suicide and all the rest of it. I think both is required. I would also love to see some investment in things for kids to do that are not phone stuff. So more investment in activity, youth clubs, playground sports, all that kind of stuff. You know, I'd probably tax the social media companies to do that, because I think they have created a bit of a mental health crisis amongst our young people. And we need to work hard now to give them healthy alternatives.
Yeah, eSafety here in Australia said that, you know, actually detailed in their research where the money that was saved should be spent. And it was on schools and play and activities to engage children around certain, you know, around those times when they weren't using their phones.
Yeah.
Why do you think government has been so slow and so soft? You engage with them, you talk to them directly.
Yeah, I mean, I do, and I think they've slightly swallowed, in our country anyway, I can only talk about our country, but they've slightly swallowed the Kool-Aid that, you know, we mustn't get in the way of, they're desperate for growth, that we mustn't upset the big tech companies because they'll somehow or other withdraw, and, you know, we won't get the sort of boost from, you know, frankly, they're the only companies that are making a lot of money these days, so we need their money basically. And let's stay on the right side of them. And particularly in the early days of Trump, I think that was the case, because there was a concern that if we did anything punitive to any of the big, you know, US-owned companies, there might be some ramifications. I think that's receded a bit now. And also big tech spend millions on lobbying. You know, their playbooks, I think, across the world are very similar. They sometimes, you know, spend money with organizations that kind of become mouthpieces for them. And there's a lot of, you know, schmoozing MPs and parliamentarians and trying to convince them that, you know, we don't want a nanny state and all the rest of it. So, or the argument about the dark web, or kids have got to learn to use these things because technology is the future, and, you know, and my answer to that is, well, they can learn to use it at 16. They really don't need to be exposed to pornography, violence, and addiction at the age of 8. So yeah, so I think there's a whole host of things, but unfortunately, I'm kind of coming round to your view that, you know, big tech really cares about profits, and government needs to be the bit in between that cares about things like public health. And when there's a collective action problem, that's exactly what they are for, to deal with that. So but it's amazing, isn't it? It requires the public to sort of make a massive fuss,
yeah,
to take notice, and that's what we're trying to do here.
100%, and you've got a lot of them, and fantastic. Where has the media been in this fight? So really interesting. As a lifelong journalist, I'm pretty sure my job, in fact, I know it's my job, is to protect the underdog, right? To use, the power of the pen, if you like, the fourth estate, whatever you want to call it, to basically stand up for people that don't have a voice themselves, right? It's my responsibility. Where are they in this debate? Because they were worryingly silent in the Google debate. What have you heard much from them here? Because to your point, you've used this phrase 3 or 4 times, we are in a child welfare crisis. Okay. Surely this should be front page news every day. If this was a virus that was targeting children and giving them these things, we'd be screaming at the government to find vaccines or, open hospitals or special units or figure out what was going on. But we're not doing that. There seems to be a silence.
I think there are individual journalists here and who actually, and it's remarkably like the MPs, it's the journalists whose kids have struggled with mental health issues, and they put that down, lots of it down to social media use, who are pushing the fight here. But I don't think people, this is why we actually recently ran an ad campaign where we stuck cigarette style health warnings on the back of phone boxes and put them on billboards everywhere. So quite graphic. I don't know if you have them in Australia, but you may have seen them here, but quite graphic images of things like self-harm and saying, phone addiction triples the risk of, suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. And I think it's framing it as the public health risk that it is, as opposed to a problem for parents, and parents need to parent better. And I think, that's the shift. And I think for too long, people have been fed this idea that, where parents just need to learn how to use parental controls, and parents just need to, stand up and exert some control over their unruly children. And I think that particularly in our right-wing press, there's been quite a sympathetic response to that. But even, it's interesting now, the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch here, is pro a social media ban. Now she's kind of anti-regulation generally. So, but again, I think it's because she's got kids of the right age, and she sees the problem very clearly in her own household.
So Arturo Bahar is the guy that Meta hired to look after safety on Meta platforms. He's one of only 11 people in the world qualified to do the job. They brought him in, they gave him all these controls. He went in and tried to do what you're not supposed to do. He created under 16s accounts, and he identified the children, they were fake. And then he created adult sites, adult accounts on Instagram, and then identified himself clearly in those fake accounts as a predator and tagged himself as a predator, and then found there was no control whatsoever for the predator to contact the underage child and to send messages to the underage child. And he was able to groom the child himself, going both ways. Sent the emails and the proof all the way up to the very bosses. Went through 39 of his colleagues in writing the email and making sure that the email was appropriate, getting the support of absolutely everybody, and took it to the top. And they just went, well, we're not going to change that. It's going to impact on our engagement metrics. It's going to slow down our growth. It's going to damage our ability to hit our KPIs. No one's going to get their bonus this year. And he quit. And the head of advertising at Meta quit. Brian Bolland has also been on this podcast, and he left $10 million of bonuses on the table when he left. And when they tried to give it to him, he said, I don't want it. These are people who are now starting to take a stand on behalf of parents, on behalf of you, on behalf of me. We need to support them. It's difficult to be a whistleblower. These people are destroying their entire careers, but they're doing it with the really desperate knowledge that something very serious is happening. And the people that have stayed are the people that have the most to gain from this continuing. And the people that are leaving are the ones that are willing to give it all up because they're trying to make the world a better place for us. I know who I believe. I don't know. It doesn't feel terribly different.
It's hard to think, whenever it was back in 1998 and Google came on the scene, and their whatever their slogan was, do no evil.
Yeah, don't be evil, yeah.
and these companies all talk about how purpose-driven they are, and we all know that actually working for a purpose-driven company is one of the big motivations of work. I don't know how people any longer can pretend what is happening is not happening and work in these places anymore. I genuinely am coming to that conclusion that they're the richest. They're part of the big seven. I mean, in theory, there's only going to be 7 of them left in the world eventually. They don't need to be as rapacious as they are. And they're fixated in a slightly macho game of competing with each other for supremacy. They've already bought up or made bankrupt most of their sort of competition. It's just, so working for those companies must be quite weird. You must have to put your head in the sand, because the idea that they're purposeful, I mean, obviously they're brilliant. Obviously they make amazing things, but purposeful, if your purpose is to cause a mental health crisis amongst kids, then that's what they're doing. So I agree with you. We should celebrate the people who whistleblow. But I also think, I don't know, I wonder, how could you work for stuff like this? It's mind-blowing to me.
What about the parents? So the parents have incredible power here. The parents can be tougher. These parents are also addicted, right? I think that's the other thing to recognize, isn't it? This is a cross-generational addiction. We don't see those very often. If a child was addicted to drugs and so are the parents, it's probably much harder to get your kid off the drugs, right? So you probably know more parents than almost anyone in the world, really, through your network. What's the parents' position on this, do you think? And what can they do if there's anything they can do?
Well, it's a good point you raise. We are all addicted, I think, in one way or another. The difference is, I guess, largely our sort of brain connections are formed. So, the damage of that daily addiction dopamine hit probably is less obvious. But we are all addicted. And I think, the first thing parents can do is try and control their own addiction, because they are role models, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So, that having some basic rules like no phones at the dinner table, no phones in the bedroom, that they follow as well as their kids. So they are setting an example. Which, I come across quite a lot of people now, and it's talked about a lot, who are themselves removing themselves from social media.
Yeah.
And they talk about how much happier that makes them. Mm-hmm. And I think there will be a general move into society to try and break that habit, because it is a habit, isn't it? Because I think people, it's not just kids with mental health problems. I think we all feel, if nothing else, the inexorable need to post and to be visible and to be liked and all that kind of stuff it's not healthy. I think parents should think very carefully about their own usage, and of course it's hard because these things are addictive.
I haven't been on Facebook in 12 years. I've never been on Instagram. I'm very unusual. I'm not on Twitter. I'm a journalist and I'm not on Twitter. Unheard of. I use LinkedIn. I sometimes use WhatsApp to talk to the football team. But really, I don't use social, so I've never felt the addiction. So to me, it feels very odd to see people getting so hooked and locked in, right? When you view it from the outside. But clearly, it's a very tight grip that it puts on people. So tell me, and tell everyone, how do people get hold of one of these phones? Because I've got a funny feeling that these things, that parents are going to go crazy for these. So are these only in the UK, or are you going to distribute them globally? What's the plan?
Well, we would love to distribute them globally, and I know I want to take you up on your kind offer to talk to you about that, about Australia, because it's Australia kind of in on. Yeah. I mean, okay. So at the moment, there's a website. It's UK based, and it's otherphone.co.uk. Do go and have a look at it and check it out. But we are planning to come to Australia and other destinations. So yeah, watch this space. But I definitely want to pick your brains on that, Ricky.
100% sold to the lady in England that's doing great work. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for being so brave. Thank you for being courageous enough to step up and walk a different direction to everybody else. Thank you for talking to governments. I know that prime ministers are terrified of you and your community because you have so much to say, and all power to you. I think you're filling the gap that our once courageous media used to fill. When there's a vacuum left, others have to step in, and I think it's you. Thank you so, so much for your work.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you. And for you too, Ricky. You're an inspiration to all of us. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you.